Hello, Hasina.
Hello, sir.
We are about to start, no?
Yes, sir. We'll start at 7 sharp.
Hello. Good evening to everybody. It is 7 o'clock, and I'm told that we can start precisely at 7.
Good
So,
evening, everyone,
good evening.
and a warm welcome to the third and final day of Before the Budget Shaping Kerala's Fiscal Future, the pre budget discussion series organized by the Center for Budget Studies, CUSAT. I extend a warm and respectful welcome to all dignitaries, speakers, and participants joining us today. The theme for today's discussion is the future of Kerala's public finance, risks, reforms, and renewal. I invite Professor M.K. Sugmaran Nair, former Director, Center for Budget Studies, CUSAT, to take over as the moderator for the session. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Hasina. I had a look at the program schedule. There are 6 papers, and there is 1 hour and 30 minutes in my hand. So let us decide that each each paper presenter takes 10 minutes, exactly 10 minutes. Cut down the unnecessary details, come to the key points, and present them. Now, of the 6 papers, I try to find some relationship between them. There are 2 papers relating to growth and public finance. There is 1 paper on investment and budgets. There are 2 papers on social welfare related issues. And there is 1 paper on fiscal deficit. Therefore, I am trying to rearrange the sequence of the papers. So the first paper to be presented will be by Dr. Hari Kurup. Dr. Hari Kurup, as I understand, is a retired professor from Government College, Kasaragod. His paper is on how can budget be designed to simultaneously support economic growth, social protection, and fiscal sustainability. Let me invite Dr. Hari Kurup first. Hari Kurup, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you so much for inviting me for this brief talk. Yeah, the topic is, as the chair moderator suggested, it's on economic growth, social protection, and financial sustainability. Of course, three competing objectives, and maybe I'll briefly discuss on those and come up with my take on that. To start with, see, on the economic growth side, we are not lagging behind that much. I mean, we are at par with the national level. Growth as such in nominal terms is not a big issue, at least for an economy with somewhat substantial base. The growth rate that way is not an issue. But where is the issue then? That's what we are trying to look at. The issue is it's not about today's growth. We should actually think about the future growth. So what we basically need is we have some issues with our capital investment. So we need to augment the capital investment. That's one thing. Then coming to the other two issues, one is on the social protection. Yeah, it's really a must in a democratic system and our kind of a society where we follow an alternate path for development. Uh, that's typically important. But how much thrust we attach onto that is something to be discussed. Or where do we put the priority? We have emerging issues of aging. We have issues of care economy. All that are there in the front. So leaving out the social protection side and also continuing with our on the education, health, and sectors where we used to spend a lot, and we have a substantial edge compared to other regions in the country. We can't go back on that. Also, we have a huge committed expenditure coming in those lines. So all on a sudden, moving away from that, saying that these are somewhere freebies and all that, that won't work. So social protection has to go in one side. Then where does this the third issue of financial sustainability comes in? Financial sustainability, I would say, uh, economy is growing one thing, but then the connect between the growth and the our resource mobilization is not, there is some mismatch. Why this mismatch is not a structural issue that way? It's basically, the tax handles of the state government are gone. The tax rates and tax slabs on those, we don't have much of a control. So that's an issue that one has to really understand. And again, based on the FRBM Act and other stipulations based on, say, fiscal deficit and all, our borrowing capacity, space is also limited to a great extent. Even though the growth is okay, but then on these counts, I mean, I repeat on the tax buoyancy side, then on the ability to raise resources from other than tax revenue, I mean, maybe through borrowing, that's also limited. Then I'll quickly come to my take on this. What should we do? One possibility, as I'm currently working with the State Finance Commission also as an advisor, what I would say is that there is a huge sector which we need to bank on. That's the local governments. We have been devolving funds to the local government. Local governments are now a matured system of governments, like Gram Panchayats. Then you have municipalities, corporations, block panchayat, and district panchayats. At least Gram Panchayats, municipalities and corporations, they have own revenue. They have devolved funds, so others also have devolved funds. And one important thing that we should notice is that unlike the state taxes, the state taxes, its buoyancy rates, which I have calculated for the tax SOTR, state-owned tax resources, the buoyancy is just around 0.96. That means when GDP grows by 1 percentage point, or the tax collection grows by 0.96 percentage. With regard to non-tax revenue, state non-tax revenue, it is 0.91 for the last 10-year decadal period. So the growth in tax collection is not commensurate with the growth in our state GDP growth, GSDP growth, I would say. So that's what, there is a slight disconnect between these two. But when it comes to the local governments, what we can see is that local governments actually is the other way. The tax handles are better, non-tax handles are better, and even the tax buoyancy is very high, pretty high. For all the local governments, see, for the tax buoyancy part, if you look at, overall tax buoyancy is above 1.03. If you add, say, they have the professional taxes, they have property taxes, but the professional tax, of course, the tax buoyancy is relatively low because of its rates have not been raised for the last 30 years. But other than that, even for professional tax, the tax buoyancy is above 1. And when it comes to the non-tax components, say especially fees, license fees, user fees, and all that, it's more than 2. That means there is a great potential in our system which needs to be tapped. And why it is to be tapped is, my take is that the capital investment part can, to a great extent, be accomplished through them. We suggested most of the time, we say that PPP model should be there. We should also think of a model where the state governments can also partner with the local governments. And the local governments should actually engage in, or they can come together, some integrated projects with the departments, I would say, the state's departments, and take up some projects so that it can improve our capital investment. And in that case, our focus should be on specific areas which the local governments are also interested. I would say again, care economy, or say aging, or say issues of urbanization, or water supply, or say sewage, or things like that. So that's an area one can actually look at. And more than that, another thing is, you also have this, that state governments, you have limitations in borrowing. But for local governments, in fact, many of them have surplus income. So naturally, we should actually now think of allowing the local governments, I mean, Gram Panchayats specifically, to go for borrowing, which people would be willing to give them, since they have an assured flow of resources coming in from, say, their tax handles. And also, the municipalities and corporations can actually go in for municipal bonds. Of course, the national level, they can mobilize money from the bond market. You get, say, some 13% subsidy for, say, 200 crores. So first 2 years, initially to start off, one can think of such options too. So my take here is that this is an area that the budget should also foresee, to think of, not just to think of the budget usually is for an annual financial statement, but I would say that we should actually think beyond. Even the budget should think beyond. Like now the plans are not there much. We should think beyond. We should put some seeds in even the present budget upcoming budget, whichever is coming, then we should think futurist. So that maybe in another 5 years, this gap in the capital expenditure thing can be somehow managed. So some questions are coming. Maybe I'll get another 2 minutes to answer it, I suppose.
Excuse me, can you wait till the end so that you can put all the questions together and answer?
Yeah, that's it. Otherwise, I see it on the screen.
I understand. I understand. I think that would be better for managing the time.
Yeah. I will finish it soon because I know the time is so precise. You have to finish it in 8 minutes. I think, yeah. So what I was saying that this is one area which we should actually focus. Why I'm saying that in 60s and 70s we invested in health, education, and all. It really paid off. Our Kerala model really paid off. There is no doubt in that. Our youngsters, we all got jobs, so all that. But now the local governments are all also out of their infancy period. They are out of their infancy. They are into their 30s, middle-aged. They can really support, give back, pay back in that sense. But then we should have a long-term strategy. Every budget should actually think in those lines. We should identify priority areas. We should be able to link it with the budget should be able to link it with them so that these issues in some case, I mean, in both cases, I mean, in terms of borrowing space, it's there for local bodies. Now, I understand that even though the state borrowing limit is fixed, local governments can borrow up to nearly, say, 1 lakh crores of rupees. So there is a huge space available there. And also for generating revenue with the limited buoyancy of the state taxes, one can actually think of helping them or partnering with them with the local governments, and that's our future. That's what I want. With that, I conclude here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hari Kurup, for your very thought-provoking presentation. And now, can I invite Dr. Ranjit PS? He will speak on Kerala's debt trajectory and sustainable under current growth and revenue assumptions. Dr. Ranjit, please.
Sir, so I have to answer it later on, right?
Later
After
on,
this.
after everybody presents, I think we will have a focused discussion.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to present my observations on the recent issue on public debt. Okay, so I have certain observations that that our current working paper is based on that. I mean, this is based on our current working paper on Kerala's debt issue, the sustainability issue, and I'm going to present it in 8 bullet points. I think due to the lack of time, I think I will present very briefly. So the first one is about the narrative. As we all know that the state financial condition is often portrayed in the public eye as evidence of chronic indiscipline and misgovernance. But if you see the latest CAG report, that is the second one in that way, State Finance Analysis of Decade of 2023-24 reveals that the whole narration is entirely different and logically showing a different picture. That CAG put forward a simple but a more profoundly significant observation, that is Kerala's economic challenge is not an excessive annual borrowing or fiscal profligacy, but rather an volume of debt accumulation over decades. Now, CAG report, if you closely see, Kerala's that's the second point. The comparative perspective, if you see, Kerala's total debt liability stands at 36.5% in 23-24. Of this public debt, that comprising market borrowing and central loans, accounts for almost 24.8%. But when you compare to other Indian states, Kerala does not rank among the most debt-ridden. Rather, it stands roughly in the middle of the list. Specifically, if you project the public debt, it is 17th in terms of public debt. Given that the states like Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, West Bengal, Bihar, and Rajasthan carry a significantly heavier debt burden than Kerala. But the excessive focus on Kerala often appears factually incorrect, maybe, or it can be politically motivated. And the CAG figures clearly clarify that Kerala side debt is not just a recent failure, but the culmination of the structural factors formed over a period of time. If you see before the pandemic situation, the debt was more or less between 25 to 30%. And now you see the third point, that is a pandemic spike. So the apprehensions regarding Kerala's debt are often propagated based on the figures from the pandemic era. That is RBI has published a risk analysis where they had highlighted that Kerala is one of the risk states. During that year, the debt GSDP ratio rose nearly 40%. But you have to see the period when the state economy witnessed a contraction of almost 9%. In other words, the ratio spiked is not because of the excess borrowing, but due to the decline in the economic output. So this misinterpreting this temporary crisis as a sign of chronic economic weakness could lead to a flawed policy making, if you see. And now the post-pandemic situation, if you see, in the 2 years following the COVID-19 pandemic, if you see the CAG report, the state demonstrated economic resilience by reducing debt to GDP ratio by more than 4% without cutting back on welfare schemes or development activities. The latest figures, if you see the latest budget, the reduction has reached almost 6%. So the fact that several other heavily indebted states have yet to recover from that crisis, but Kerala made a progress in that way. But if you see our latest study, there's latest publication by us, we have projected that if this momentum continues, Kerala can reach a sustainable debt position. That is, we projected as we have generated the sustainable threshold as 27.8. So if our this current momentum goes, by 2031, we will be able to achieve the position. We will be able to achieve the 27.8 target. And if you see the fiscal deficit target, the Kerala does not show a significant indiscipline in that way. In recent years, the state has managed to keep its fiscal deficit within the 3% limit mandated by FRBM norms. But the revenue deficit persists. It is not an extreme situation, but it persists. A large portion of the state's borrowing must be utilized for it is actually utilized for the repayment of old debt or interest payment rather than new expenditure. So that is a matter of concern. That actually make a position where it creates a pressure on Kerala's financial resources. And central government's new definitions regarding borrowing limits are another concern that we have today. But even though if you see these criticisms are still there, Kerala's capital expenditure story has now it shows another story, that more than half of the borrowed amount is basically going for the capital spending, and off-budget liabilities like IFB and all is basically utilized for asset creation rather than day-to-day administrative expenses. And compared to other states, Kerala's exhibit a faster growth trend in development investment. That now the recent trend, if you see. And internal debt is actually a serious concern because that has a more heavier burden. If you see that change is also showing a lowering pace. But we cannot entirely remove the situation because our debt is structural, not just a recent indiscipline management, mismanagement or anything. It is structural. But we have to understand the structural reasons. Our elderly positions. The increasing elderly population leads to higher expenditure on pensions and healthcare. And substantial amount must be spent continuously to maintain the high standard we achieve in the areas of health and education. And Kerala's unique social structure, we all know that it necessitates ensuring urban level services even in the rural areas, makes constant government intervention inevitable. So in short, Kerala is facing second generation challenges, similar to those of developed countries, developed societies. Therefore, if you target, the whole country is targeting for developed India by 2047. And if the center is not realizing that, Kerala is also significantly contributing to that mission. So the center must provide. I think center should realize that they must provide a support by offering some interest subsidies or fixing a sustainable borrowing limit, not just an uniform 3% this one. Or they can have a strategy to bring all these states in line to the mission of 2047. Otherwise, this financial pressure will hinder existing welfare activities, or maybe it lead to the grave situation where new development projects cannot move forward if you continue the same situation. Now we have to come to the last part, that is our strategy. What is our strategy? Now, it is not just simply reducing your annual budget. That is actually a narration that made earlier, that we have to cut down our deficit position and all this. But if you want to cut down further and further, and we have to target for 3% limit in this one, we'll have problem in the future, because we cannot continue this. We cannot address the second generation issue. So we have to find out the new avenues for this to overcome this situation. We have to target for low interest loans, and we have to put pressure on the central government that we are doing now, but we have to put further to keep their sustainable borrowing limit and grant debt subsidies, and we have to have a sustainable path. The center has to keep a debt management unit in each state to monitor that. And the off-budget borrowing is now in the budget part, but we have to explore whether any immediate revenue potential is possible for this off-budget borrowing, rather than we are waiting for the returns in long-term future. And the existing, yes, obviously, as already the narration is there, that our existing on revenue potential we have to tap maximum. That process we have to continue. But if we get a sufficient amount of money, if we pool in the near future, definitely we will be in a position to reach our 27.8 target period. And also, if center helps, we can continue this strategy of we can continue our strategy, our mission, without cutting the development and welfare goals. So the need of the hour is to ensure, yes, financial sustainability we need to ensure. That is 27 point we have to ensure. But immediately, if you target next year or next year, or if you target or 2 years, 3 years time, then it will put unnecessary pressure on the state's long-term, state's second generation issues. We will not be in a position to reach that. So the point which I want to emphasize from the starting point, that is, our CAG report emphasizes that our Kerala exhibit an economic resilience. It is the issue is structural, not simply a fiscal profligacy. So we need to treat this as a stock problem. We have to have strategies to resolve the stock problem, not just the flow problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjit, for your very interesting and informative presentation. Now, can I invite Dr. Godwin SR? Dr. Godwin?
Hi, I hope I am audible to you.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, thank you. So let me appreciate, in the initial stage, such kind of a very interesting kind of, meaning serial sessions on, very critical issues. Having said that, I was actually asked to one specific question. So my answer kind of, should be, vertical, though my position normally is, different from, that rather than giving a straight answer. The question is Kerala borrowing to invest or borrowing to maintain existing commitments? So going by the numbers and using the usual the neoclassical kind of approach, the answer is Kerala primarily borrows to maintain its existing commitments rather than purely for new investments. So that is the one liner of response to that particular question. Having said that, if I meaning make a kind of brief breakdown of the argument, because if you look at the 2025-26 budget, um, we had a revenue we had a fiscal deficit of about 40,000 plus crores, 40,000 and 800 some crores, and of which 27,000 and 125 crore was basically borrowed or was utilized for meeting the revenue deficits. Okay, that leaves about 30 plus percentage, 35 almost roughly percentage for the the capital expenditure. So it's very clear that the as is fairly known, and it would be cliche to say that salaries, interest, and pension take away close to 69% of the entire revenue receipts of the state. Um, but as was was already indicated by my previous friends, speakers, much of it is a kind of accumulation. And if you go to the last 20 years, okay, so if you look at the state's position with regard to management of debt, actually have increased, meaning improved substantially. For example, if you look at the period 2000 to 2005, then the average, the revenue deficit to fiscal deficit, that ratio, we used to, devote about 78% of our entire revenue deficits were covered by, the fiscal deficit, or, this borrowing was, for the sole source of, financing that much kind of, expenditure, which actually during the period 2006 to 11, we have actually substantially brought down what you call consolidation phase in that particular dimension. So this particular dependency has been brought down to about 62%. And that particular momentum we were able to continue till the COVID. Okay. So as was already indicated by my friend Dr. Ranjit, that the of course the about Kerala has got that particular specific problem of 2018-19 flood, and then continuous about 3-4 years of some kind of a and the 21-22 the severe damage to this particular economy. But despite those questions, the state was able to recuperate substantially, and showing a kind of better performance with regard to the average revenue deficit to fiscal deficit, that particular ratio, where still substantially we borrow to finance the existing commitments than to new investments, despite the substantial improvement over a period of time, which is primarily accounted for by, though the salary burden kind of is stabilizing, but the pension question, as well as the interest payments that is linked to the accumulation of your past debt, that keeps on that's still showing some kind of a uh, sustainability question to this one. Then you can ask a question whether all this particular, whether this existing commitments are primarily in the nature of the use and using up expenditure, or in the form of pure exclusive consumption expenditure. But if you adjust for the so-called, the revenue, effective revenue deficit concept, and especially you account for, the health and education component, in that particular, if you adjust for about, those expenditure, which roughly, meaning health and education, account, for about 15 to 18% of, the entire revenue expenditure of, the state. Okay. So once you adjust for that, then uh, we are primarily borrowing about 50% of our expenditure. The borrowed money actually goes to finance, your accumulated, the existing commitment. So that meaning it's there is no sense to say that, in meaning the money that you spend on health and, especially the a substantial proportion on the preventive, promotive, as well as on the entire education part, is unproductive, or, pure consumption kind of an argument, doesn't, make much of a sense from even from a in the modern era of, this knowledge economy, human capital, and other kind of, perspectives. But having said that, 50% is, a very sizable kind of question. So now, let me, since, I haven't studied this issue, the kind of, the solutions, some of, the question, the issues to be addressed, in the immediate present as well as in the long term one are important. One is, of course, the efficiency of this particular question, when expenditure, because we normally kind of, treat that, bureaucracy is not, the so-called, the traditional sense of, labor. They may not be fitting into that particular category. So some maneuvering of, the expenditure towards, this particular, labor for the labor in the official sense of the term, traditional sense of the term, and we kind of have an ideological position that, bureaucracy is also labor. I think, that needs to be, disentangled. And so what I'm trying to convey is that the efficiency part of the expenditure, some rationalization of expenditure becomes, important. For example, why do we maintain such a huge agriculture department, and, the
Will
expenditure
you take another 1 minute and conclude?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yes.
So that is actually one thing we need to be the efficiency part. I'm just giving a kind of, clue on that particular dimension. Then, bureaucracy eating away substantial proportion, especially in the higher level. So the associated component is, some kind of a freezing of, the pension towards, the highest end has to be, thought about seriously. It may not be that easy to think about, even from a political perspective. For example, fixing a cap on the pension with, some kind of minimum amount, towards the on an annual basis. So those, issues also have to be seriously thought about. At this particular stage of, the state's, financial one. Of course, the sender, all of them, play a substantial part in worsening, the state's particular financial position that, we are in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Godwin. Let me invite Mr. Krishna Kumar to make a presentation on the returned migrants and economic contribution, rather than viewing them mainly as welfare mechanisms. Please,
Sir,
Krishna Kumar.
Shama sir joined.
Krishna Kumar,
Join
hello?
ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല.
ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല.
Yeah.
അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് we will go to the next person, Professor Anita, former head of the Department of Economics, Karivattam, where I happened to be a student before she came there, perhaps.
Yeah.
Dr. Anita, please.
Yes, sir. A very warm good evening to one and all. So, as mentioned here, my title is Rethinking Social Security in the Context of Aging Kerala. The question given to me is, should Kerala gradually shift from income support to care-based social security, especially for the aging population? So as we all know that the demographic transition in Kerala is unique, with the elderly population already surpassing 20% in 2024 and projected to reach around 27.7% by 2051. So we can justify this data with the global level data, that is according to the United Nations World Population Prospects 2024. The global population aged 60 and above is expected to double by 2050. But in Kerala, it is predicted that it is around the increase is around 360%. And by 2030, 1 in 6 people in the world will be aged 60 years or over. So that means there is a huge challenges regarding aging population in the context of Kerala. So 20% means it is around 72 lakhs people in their old age category. That means the 60 plus or 60 and above. And if we calculate among the disabled community is around 5%. That is 3,60,000 people having or have with any type of disability, maybe mental disability or locomotor disability. And this is calculated on the basis of the Kerala Disability Census 2015, in which they mentioned that 5% of the old age community are under the category of any type of disability. So this is only an approximate figure. Maybe after COVID, the data may be very high. So the consequences are the burden within the family, and the majority of the primary caregivers are women. And the impact is disproportionate, or the burden is very high on the women community. And besides, we know that the migration of young groups and the nuclear family system in Kerala increases this burden to the women community. And we can see that from the labor force participation, the labor force participation of the women community are very low. And there are a number of studies which justify the heavy burden related to care works is one of the reasons for that one. And here we can see that we need to focus on the care economy for, as mentioned by the ILO, the long run balanced sustainable development. We need to focus on the care economy principles. So social security, we are all know about the social security principles, and it comes under it is a basic human rights, and it is declared as universal human rights in 1948. So coming to the care economy principle, I would like to focus only a few among the principle. And one of the basic principles is it is a public good and human rights. That means it is the collective responsibility rather than an individual or private family burden. A core principle is addressing the disproportionate burden of care work on women. And ILO has developed the 5 R's framework: recognize, reduce, redistribute, reward, and representative principles to implement care economy in an economy. And regarding the income security, there are a number of studies which shows that income security remains a significant one, and it should not be viewed as a substitute for direct care services, especially as traditional family support systems decline. And the pensions system is, in some cases, it is not a general case. In some cases, insufficient pension amount is insufficient, and the inability to substitute the services are very low. And the other challenges are the high out-of-pocket expenditure for tertiary care services. And it is calculated that we know that the out-of-pocket expenditure is very high in Kerala compared to other states in India. And in the case of the old age community, it is 4 times more than that of the others. And again, the family support is continuously declining due to nuclear family system and the migration, educated communities, informal work, etc. And the geriatric health needs are continuously increasing, and the mental well-being also continuously decreasing. We need long-term care initiatives. We need to support that through infrastructure facilities and other facilities. And that means aged-friendly infrastructure we need. And we need to develop a community integration to achieve a balanced long-term growth. So here the suggestion is to integrate direct care services with income support. That means we need to simultaneously focus on, we need to focus on direct care services along with the income support. Maybe in the long run, maybe we can reduce the income support and we can focus on the direct care service. But neglecting anyone may hinder the whole economic system. It affects the backward communities, women, and if we focus on the inclusive development, we need to support both. So with these words, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. The last paper is by Dr. Justin Ward, who will be presenting on the issue of flexible versus fixed borrowing capacity. Paul, Justin,
hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
You are.
What about my screen? Is it visible?
No. Only you are visible.
Oh, okay. Let me just share that. Now it is visible, right?
I think it's yeah, right.
Okay. The topic that is assigned to me for the discussion is there a need for a flexible fiscal deficit target mechanism rather than the stringent FRBM limit? Yes. Before I discuss the question, let me just provide a context. If you see the fiscal scenario of Kerala in the recent years, it is something which is very interesting. If you take the fiscal deficit of Kerala, it is 4.6% of state domestic product in 2021. Since then, it has been declining. And fiscal deficit then declined to 3% in 23-24. How could the state of Kerala achieve this? Can we say it as an improvement? These are the two questions that we have to discuss on. And I would argue that this cannot be seen as an improvement because along with the decline of the fiscal deficit, development expenditure as a percentage of state domestic product is also declining. It was 8.2% in 2021, which is declined to 5% in 23-22. So you could able to decline your fiscal deficit just by cutting down of your development expenditure. But for the other states, it is always average at 9%, and you did not find any kind of decline. So Kerala able to decline fiscal deficit by cutting down of your development expenditure. For other state, it did not happen. So the argument is very clear that we need a flexible FRBM target. So why we need a flexible FRBM target? If you see many of the states, if you look the development trajectory of the states, they are standing at the different levels of development. If they are standing at the different levels of development, how can we compare the development level across a state? Especially if you want to compare the development level among Kerala, Bihar, Tamil Nadu and Chhattisgarh, it is very difficult. So for a given FRBM target, that is actually generating different problem for the states in India. And among the states, Kerala will be the most affected state because the kind of health indicators are different, demographical concerns are very different, the kind of development pressure that you have is very different. At the same time, you have a very different infrastructural requirement. For Kerala, something which is very unique because you have a very vibrant health and education sector. At the same time, you are facing high aging of the population, and you also face a number of second generational health issues. And at the same time, there is a shrinking of the working age population. But in FRBM, you treat unequal state as fiscally equal. How can that be correct? So in the FRBM, you are not taking into account of the development initiative by the states. So not take into account of the development outcome. Along with these problems, Kerala had to face other climate related disasters. We had to face Oki, flood 1, 2, many landslides, and health related disasters such as Nipah and the COVID-19 pandemic, which definitely you need a counter cyclical spending. But that is very difficult in a given context of FRBM target. So when you look FRBM, you are very expenditure neutral. So given this scenario, I would argue that in a given fiscal federalism framework, the incentive should be given for the states who spend capital expenditure. At the same time, incentive must be also given to the state who spend for the human capital related expenditure. So for the Kerala, what we require is state-specific fiscal pass rather than the given FRBN target. So Kerala, the problem is not the fiscal indiscipline, rather than a fiscal design mismatch. So what is my argument is that there should be some arrangement within the federalism to settle these kind of issues. Otherwise, we would have to face more disputes between the center and the states. But on the other hand, which is very interesting, that is fiscal indiscipline is rising across the state. And you could observe a kind of rise of the populism, which is basically to attain the electoral outcome. In Kerala also, something very interesting, because in the ground level, you can feel there is a feeling to have more freebies. Now it is the duty of the state to go for that direction or not. So the real question right now is very, very interesting, that how could you achieve the flexibility of FRBM across state along with the macroeconomic stability? So that is a tough task before us. Then according to Wallace Oyates, in federalism, you have three fiscal functions. The allocation function will be effectively handled by state and the subnational government, whereas the stabilization and distribution are the primary function of the central or the union government. So when they go for stabilization, especially the union government, that is affecting, that is constraining the allocation of state. That is very serious, and that is what we are witnessing right now. So when we talk about deficit, it is nothing but the combined deficit of central and the state government. So in this given context, we can we can discuss on a particular question: can we blame union government for fixing FRBM target for macroeconomic stabilization? Because that is the primary duty of union government. But while going for the macroeconomic stabilization, employment generation is also a concern. If you look Kerala standing at high rate of youth unemployment in the country. So state has a specific role in employment generation, which is also very difficult in given a rigid FRBM target. So rigid FRBM target is also generating a number of problems, because the states are now looking for innovative financing. And in Kerala, you might be observed, you can connect that to the generation of off-budget liabilities, which leads to the creation of the companies like KSSPL and KIFBI. So I don't want to discuss more on that area. So again, those companies are generating problems because of the deviations. So my argument, let me just conclude by saying that a note of caution is that, yes, we need flexible FRBN target, but with a cautious approach. With this, I conclude.
Thank you, Dr. Justin, for a very brief but interesting presentation. Now, I plan to have the rest of the session as follows. Perhaps we can allow the participants to raise their questions maybe for 5 to 8 minutes, not more than that. And after that, the presenters can reply to those, answer to those, and while answering those questions, they can consider not only the questions that are asked, but also the questions that are given in writing to you. So combining all those, we can, rather than answering each question, you should try to give a general reply, including everything, so that we don't waste time on each question. Many of the questions may be similar, so you can put them together and give one answer. Is it acceptable?
Yes.
If so, we can open the question session now. Please, questions can be asked. The questions should be very brief and to the point. Please. Anybody wanting to ask a question? I think nobody wants to ask a question. I'm sure they have.
Sir,
Hello?
I have a question, sir. I am Nitin, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my question is to Dr. Godwin.
Your
sir.
name, please. Name, please.
I am Nitin Thomas from Bharat Mata
Oh,
College.
Nitin. Okay. Yes, please. You have
Hello, sir.
changed, it seems. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, my question is directed to Godwin, sir. He already mentioned about the rationalization of the workforce of Kerala or the government sector. Many government sectors should be rationalized. That is a good suggestion from him. I would like to have his view on the why can't we increase the revenue from the departments of the government, because many of the government departments run on a very subsidized manner. It is not at all reflecting the market rates currently available in the other sectors or in the private sector, especially in the case of the schools and colleges. Many of the schools, if you look at the school sector, many of the parents are moving to the CBSE schools by paying money out of their pockets, while the state specific schools or the aided schools are finding it difficult to get the students. If we can match the expectations of the parents of the Kerala, then some revenue can also be raised and the burden of the state will also be reduced. So what is your take on that, sir?
Thank you, Nitin. Any other question?
Sir, audible?
Yes.
Okay, so sir, my name is Pranavamma. So the question I want.
Name, please. Once again.
Pranavamma.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sir, so my question is, we know that in other countries like China, the government does take a heavy role in the promotion of industries. For example, public sector enterprises constitute a majority in the stock market in China. So, and also these firms are really efficient. In many of the Trump trade talks, it was these public sector units, like their production was the one that helped China have a favorable position in the negotiating table. So, what is preventing our own public sector enterprises, especially Kerala, from dominating our own sectors? For example, it may be a knowledge economy, or it may be rubber cultivation and so on. So what is preventing our public sector enterprises, which has access to one of the most qualified workforces in all of Kerala, from achieving the kind of success that China has? For example, the Israelis themselves have a lot of state-owned enterprises that produce cutting-edge research. Why can't the government also create or maintain such excellent public sector enterprises? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
Sir, there are some questions in the chat box.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, there are questions in the chat box, of course. So I invite Dr. Hari to take 5 minutes, if possible, to give answers to the questions that have been raised to you. Please, Dr. Hari.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. I find one question which is actually in the chat box while I was presenting. That's precisely, I think it was on something related to the efficiency of capital investment. Is anybody raising question now? Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is on the efficiency of the capital expenditure. Yeah, that's something which we need to be careful about. That's something, in fact, the question which was raised now also, that we really need to have some thinking on that. Somehow, the efficiency check we basically do with some regulatory frameworks, some governmental audit things. But beyond that, we should be able to use technology in many sense, even for, say, construction sites. This instead of this manual checking and all that, with the AI age, at least without AI itself, one should be able to use technology, innovations, clear data structures, clear monitoring of each projects. If that is done, we can make a big headway. It's not just, again, I go back to the point which I was talking about local governance. Even in the local governance, huge money is being spent. In fact, some part of the devolution, the local body, local governments are in fact spent out of the development expenditure. Say last year it was 9,215 crores was spent on as development expenditure, out of which at least 50%. We really don't have real data on that, but at least 50%. That's my hunch. Say like 4,000 to 5,000 crores would have been spent on building assets. But then we don't know how. Well, the first thing is we are not clear how much is being uh, put for creating assets. That's a big issue. We don't have clear data on that, and we don't have much of a provision to see how these assets are maintained, how these are being monitored. That's an issue that, of course, our society, our system has to improve upon that. I would say that technology can help in a great deal with this data-driven society. I would say technology, data management principles, and also some bit of social auditing in that sense is required. Especially if, say, at the local level, social auditing can help in a great way for that. I have not checked the chat box. Otherwise, is there any other questions directed to me, or if needed, I can answer afterwards? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me invite now Dr. Ranjit.
Yeah, sir, I think I've already responded to the question raised to me, that local borrowing, on the local borrowing. So for me, the point is that for me, borrowing is per se is not bad thing. I think, but the matter is that we should keep our borrowing within the sustainable positions. And predominantly, we have to use the borrowed money for the capital investment that can aim some long-run return in the future. So it is problematic only when it is aligned with the long-term fiscal capacity, whether it's a local level or the national level or the central level. So that is the answer to that question. But we have to see that the current juncture, what we are now. I perfectly agree with the previous speaker on the flexible this one. So we are actually working on a modeling on flexible targeting for state. And instead of putting a single uniform 3% target, we have to have a framework for each state based on their fiscal capacity, fiscal positions, cost stability, and all these things. We can work out a strategy for a flexible deficit so that they will be in a position to meet. Maybe if you cut down as I mentioned earlier, immediately if you cut down the expenditure or anything, or as he mentioned, the development expenditure or anything, it will have repercussions in the economy. Instead of that, you have more time for targeting, for achieving the target. For example, we have developed for a threshold range of 27.8% for Kerala. If you target if you project it for meeting that target by 28, it will be very difficult. Then we have to cut down our deficit again to the below 3%. Instead of that, you give a larger time period, say 10 years time period, so that they can work out the strategies with long-term investment, expecting the return on with the long-term investment. They will be able to position by the time period within 10 years, that is 27.8 in the this thing. So that is the point which I want to add along with this question. But we have to keep in mind that the current position, the current fiscal position, debt position of the state is not within the sustainable limit. We need to travel at least 8-point scale down to reach that point, reach the sustainable position. Thank you.
Next, Dr. Godwin, please.
Meaning two questions were directed at me. One by our Dr. Muralidharan, and he asked the question, who should take the initiative for rationalization? Of course, it is the government. Meaning though at incremental pace, some rationalization is actually happening. For example, a GO has come, has been released today by the state government, redeploying about 99 teachers, government college teachers, in the, different departments who have been found that, kind of excess, meaning who have got, that 16 plus kind of, or less than 16 hours working load in different colleges to the newly created colleges where, there are existing vacancies. So, and in 2021 there was though there are opposition about that particular issue, the 16-hour etc. And some rationalization actually has happened. So, and with regard to this public works department, of course, some rationalization is happening, because if you look at the efficiency of expenditure, this KIFBI initiated works in a way is substituting, the PWD kind of initiative. So some rationalization is happening. So there are more scope for, in the civil supplies, department, as was indicated, more, better responding to the market signals than agriculture department. Judiciary is one area where, huge saving of, especially rationalization has to happen in the interest of public service. Likewise, the different, especially I was indicating about this bureaucracy question. So, though we say that decentralization at a different level has happened, but in terms of the delegating and even from the larger perspective of the bureaucracy, it hasn't happened. If you look at the secretariat file movement system across different departments, I think it's moving at a very snail pace and causing severe damage to the public service and even to the economy. That is my take on that part one. Definitely the state should take the initiative. And to my friend's question, on Dr. Jitin's question on the charging revenue, definitely there are areas where some charging has to be basic charging, or an incremental improvement in cover, meaning raising resources are must be, meaning must be possible. So especially economic services and from the, for example, revenue department, local self government departments, where there are huge possibilities. Even higher education, that is possible, but I'm a bit concerned about the argument at the school level. The school level problem is, there is a constitutional commitment that education at the public, especially when it comes to the public sector, it has to be a right. So to what extent you can think about charging, even if you provide better quality services, etc., is a question. It needs larger kind of a discussion before closing on. But still, I would say, of course, the other issues, there are parastatal agencies like the university. They are actually charging, which is not reflected in the non meaning the usual the non meaning revenue receipts of the state government. For example, universities, then in the higher education institutions, there are institutions like, this parent and teachers organization. All these are many things are contributed by them, which may not be getting reflected in, but definitely, since, the public sector institutions in the higher education sector are still the leading ones in the state, there is higher scope for, resource, mobilization in the higher education sector, in the professional education, as well as in the general education sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Godwin. Next, let me invite Professor Anita. Anita, please.
Sir, I think there is no direct question to me regarding my presentation, but there is one general question related to the lack of efficiency in terms of public enterprises in Kerala. And I think maybe in the conventional or the traditional system, there are a number of reasons like trade unionism in Kerala and other factors are there. But I think recently we are focusing on the skill development basis. We are giving skill training programs according to the need of the current system. And government is more focusing on the startup missions, student startup missions, etc. So we may expect growth in the near future. And again, the conditions of the Kerala state is we can't compare it with the China case. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Now the last person is Justin. Justin, please.
Sir, for me also there is no question, I think.
No question. Then I will wind up.
Sir, for Justin, sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Regarding, it is a nice suggestion to incorporate the flexible FRBM network framework. But is the center thinking on the same way to introduce the flexible FRBM framework, or is there any international commitment for them that construct or that restrict them from introducing this flexible FRBM framework?
Justin, please answer the question.
Okay, I got your question, but for me it is very difficult to say that because that is from the law perspective, right? Constitutional perspective of who is actually interested with the task, or that is a real question that we have to look on the flexible FRBM target. And Ranjit is rightly mentioned that, and we have to develop a right model for that. For example, on the one hand, you need a stabilization, macroeconomic stabilization. On the other hand, you can go for a flexible FRBM target. So I think the model is itself very difficult than the implementation. And the state, the center won't go for that, I think. That's a normal kind of understanding. Thank you.
Can I add one point?
Yeah, please.
So I think this question, we have a lot of models available in the international literature that there are a set of narration which states that we simply borrowed our 3% thing from Maastricht Treaty of UK. Or some people will say that it's a golden rule that we have to reduce our revenue deficit to 0%. That means whatever borrowing is going for only capital purposes. But we have made a justification in Indian case. Actually, the 12th Finance Commission has made a justification that is your saving investment formula has to be settled. For that only they have come up with this 3% limit. But that is as altogether, if you take the case of the country as a whole, yes, fine. But putting 3% on state cases, even if we try the saving position of each state, we will not be in a position to reach the 3% is applicable for all the state. Because we have to realize the position of the state, cost disabilities of the state, structure of the state, and all these things. So, but what we are suggesting is, we have, as I mentioned, that we are working on a model that the state's multiplier capacity, the state-wise multiplier capacity, if you see, the state ranges widely between, if you see the estimated value, if you see, the states are basically different hugely in terms of the number. So with this, one can argue that if you keep 3%, for example, Odisha and all, they have more capacity, more space to accommodate borrowing, but they're not borrowing. The result is their HTA ranking and all, if you see, that is not up to the mark. But on the other hand, states like Kerala and all, we have already in the upper limit, but we cannot address with this upper limit. We cannot immediately address the second generation issue, as Justin pointed out, and also in my presentation I point out, like pension, the old age, old age positions now, and we have to maintain our Kerala model of social spending and all these things. If you want to keep that momentum, then we have to have a flexible, targeting positions based on a model-based framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We had, in fact, 5 very interesting presentations, and those presentations threw up a number of issues that should be considered by the finance minister. Some of the interesting suggestions made by presenters can be summed up like this. And there, I would like to raise some concerns. For example, in the case of the issue of local bodies and the state coming together, it's very difficult because in the present situation, given the administrative structure, it will be very difficult. And again, the local bodies have surplus funds, true. And the local bodies can borrow, but will the public have faith in the local bodies? Will they liberally give loans to the local bodies? Because the local bodies are very fragile. There is a lot of political mudslinging there. Today, one party which encouraged borrowal, and next time another party comes, we haven't borrowed, and there is no commitment for us. That kind of answers can come. So it is difficult in the present structure. But it's a very interesting suggestion, I should say. Similarly, the suggestion that the public enterprises should be made more efficient and they can play a leading role in generating income and employment in the state. That also is a very doubtful proposition. We had 60 to 70 years of experience having the predominance of public enterprises. There was a time when we considered that the commanding height of the economy are the public enterprises. But unfortunately, we had not very good experience with the public enterprise system. Inefficiency, lack of technical change, and mismanagement. They have landed the public enterprises in a disarray. But in China, of course, it may be possible because of a different kind of political structure. But fortunately or unfortunately, we don't have that in our country. And again, rationalization of the administration. This question has been discussed by the Administrative Reforms Commission, but they have not come out with very useful suggestions. There are some suggestions for rationalizing certain cadres and all that. But one can say that given the technical change and the digital transformation in the economy, perhaps we can cut the size of the present employment in the government to half. Still, there are positions like class 4, typists, which are totally irrelevant for a modern economy. In other countries, you will not find this. And with the lesser number of people, more work can be produced. So employment will be sharply cut down. And perhaps providing employment is not the job of the government. Perhaps. That's a different question. But a major administrative restructuring is required for that. Then the issue of whether we should produce or we should provide more caregiving opportunities, or a direct income transfer. Which one is better? In fact, a combination is good. In fact, the government should create institutions and provide people to support the people who are needy. But the problem is that management of human capital there is very difficult. Unlike physical capital, which we can control, we can manage, human capital is very difficult to manage, and the system can degenerate. Direct income transfer, the money goes into the hands of the people. We do not know how efficiently they are being spent. And finally, coming to the last paper, the flexible target of borrowing. That's very interesting. Perhaps it can be introduced, but this should find a way into the Finance Commission recommendation. When the Finance Commission recommendations are favorable to some of the states, they are not favorable to other states. If we in Kerala say that we should be given flexibility because we have serious, significant achievements in certain sectors, we have an aging population, so our problems are different. But the issue is, can the central government give a special treatment to a particular state? Probably it's possible. They have done it in the case of Bihar, done it in the case of Andhra Pradesh. So for Kerala also it can be done. But political reality is reality. So we cannot expect that. So it should be woven into the Finance Commission. But how that can be done again? What is sauce for the goose can be poison for the sander. That is the problem. Perhaps the Finance Commission, if they put their heads together, they can come out with a much better formula. Anyway, these suggestions are very useful. I think the organizers of the seminar will send these suggestions to the Finance Minister so that some of those he can incorporate into the upcoming budget. And I must thank you once again for presenting interesting papers. And I suggest that they should work more on this, and each paper presented here should come out as a publication in some standard good journals. Thank you and good night.
We extend our sincere gratitude to our moderator, Professor M.K. Subbaran Nair sir, for leading the session. Thank you to all the speakers and participants for your valuable insights and presence throughout these 3 days. Thank you to all once again. Thank you, sir.
Now the meeting is over, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So thank you so much for
Thank you.
effectively moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you and good night to all of you. And have a nice dinner after this. Hello. Hello. Hello.